We're proud to welcome you to the Exceptional Advisor podcast series brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. This series aims to help you to better serve your clients, differentiate yourself from the competition, and enhance your ability to communicate those differences. Hi, I'm your host, Bob Powell.
My guests today are Ross Marino and Susan Bradley. Ross is a 30-year financial industry veteran and founder of Transitional Wealth Partners based in Wilmington, North Carolina. Susan is author of Sudden Money, Managing a Financial Windfall, and founder of the Sudden Money Institute. They are the co-authors of a recently published book titled Shaping Change and How to Respond When Life Disrupts Your Retirement Plan. Ross, Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Appreciate it.
Great to have you. I'd like to start with this question. What is it that people will learn by reading about the book or reading the book?
Well, I can jump in first. I think they're going to read that some financial planners actually understand how life works. And that is, life happens and plans change. And it's so wonderful to think about what we want 10, 20, 30 years from now, set goals, make decisions that move us towards that. That's important, and we do that. However, life is no respecter of my goals. And when I wake up tomorrow, everything may change, and that's okay because we're equipped to help people and we want to help them navigate whatever life throws at them.
Susan?
And you know, the family that we wrote about is so typical across the country. And they had some plans, they had vague plans, they had assumptions, just like everybody does, and hopes and dreams and fears and taboos and some traditions. And then when life starts to turn, it doesn't stop. You don't get to opt out. You don't get to go back. You have to go forward. And watching a family or reading about a family that struggled through and came up with some creative solutions with the help of a thinking partner, a financial planner trained in this area, I think will sound familiar and hopeful, and maybe help people start to reimagine how they might handle life when it changes. Or possibly, Bob, a lot of people reading this book are in the middle of a change. It's not an epidemic. Change is normal. It's just it has sped up in our culture. So chances are very good if someone is reading this book, if they're not in change, someone close to them is in change. Probably more than one person.
You know, as you're sort of describing what people will learn by reading this book, I'm reminded of two quotes, and I'm forgetting the boxer's name off the top of my head, who said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. And of course, the famous quote that says, man plans and God laughs. And so those are, I think, for me, two. And so it's good that you're writing about this, because we all have to plan for the contingencies, I guess, right? And however difficult it may be to plan for the things that you're not planning for.
You know, it changes part of life. We all say that. And it is true. You get that from the very beginning. But what's so interesting is that we were never really trained and never shown, even as children, how to manage change. It's just something you get through, you expedite through. You get from point A to point B as fast as possible. And there's not much in between. The in between is the transition from the way one stage of life was to another. I mean, just going from high school to college is a big change, but there's a transition of adaptation and adjustment and finding your way and all of that. And that's one that you have hopefully some good guidance around when you get out there and you're in your 50s or 60s and you're looking at retirement. There's the assumption that you're supposed to know how to do this. It just isn't so.
Right. So, Ross, you wrote the book partly based on personal experience. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm a financial planner, so I love to plan for the future. I love to make plans. I was even talking about a vacation coming up last night, and my wife just started laughing and said, do you have spreadsheets? You know, what did you plan out? Do you have an itinerary? Because it's just what you do, and all the contingencies and plan B, it's just the way I'm wired. Well, When I started my career as a financial planner, I'd been an advisor for a few years and realized I need to be more holistic. I need to do financial planning. Moved to Wilmington, North Carolina at the time, was ready to start my CFP training. And within 30 days, I had a back injury and ended up working on the floor in a room over my garage for about 6 years, and had to build a practice where I couldn't really leave the house. I couldn't sit, couldn't golf or network or go out to lunch, and barely stayed alive in the business during that time. But the big takeaway was whatever I planned, it didn't work, but that's okay. Figure it out and figure out what you need to do. And then as time went on, I eventually got out of the house, opened an office, and then personally found myself in the position where I had a special needs daughter and a wife who had a disability. So I spent a pretty long period of time that continues to today, where I'm effectively a single parent for a special needs child and a caregiver to my wife. And learning how to navigate those situations, the disruption that happens, the stress, the intensity, the fog, where you're really not sure what you did yesterday sometimes, learning how to navigate through all that, it's eye-opening. You can't think 20 years down the road. It's hard to make decisions today, let alone financial plan for the future. Yet my experience really isn't that unique as far as life goes, because all people go through this. And financial planners, we really weren't trained to understand how to help people in this situation. And in part, it's because, I'll speak for myself, I was clueless. I had no idea what it would be like to go through that. Part of Susan's training and the Institute's training is to help us understand that. But going through it personally really opened my eyes that we need to put some focus here.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question. The book talks a lot about transitions. Susan, that's your specialty. What you've described, Ross, is a disruption, which leads to maybe an unexpected transition, right? Transitioning to retirement you might plan for, but the disruptions to your plan seem different in a way, or are they not?
Well, disruption usually creates change. So you could have all kinds, it could be health, as in Ross's position. It could be something by choice. It could be some liquidity event in someone's life that disrupts the norms. So when status quo gets disrupted, even partially or totally, with many of these, like Ross is still Ross, but he had so much going on. And what he built himself was a sense of resilience. He was committed to making it work, and he just did it. Now, at this stage in his life, he's built a great business, and that doesn't mean life won't be disruptive. And I know him well enough to know that he's gone through a few while we were writing the book, but he knows he can figure it out. He knows he has a growth mindset. He knows he doesn't know how he can figure it out, but he knows he will. He just hasn't yet. And it's wonderful for financial planners to so own that kind of experience, that know that you can figure it out and be able to transmit that to their clients. Because we just can't, we almost can't plan anymore. We can prepare. We prepare for the events we see coming. We work with financial planners to help watch our back in case something happens we can't see coming. But none of that is guaranteed in life. And even if it happens on schedule with the right amount of money, with the right people, which is rare, but if it does, it's not like you thought it was going to be. So you might get there and think like, ugh, how'd this happen? I don't want this. And why? How come? What do I do now? It's just, and I think, Bob, this is the way nature works. This is the way we humans evolve. We don't evolve in status quo. We enjoy, that's kind of the plateau of life. It's when life throws us those disruptive curveballs, when the feathers hit the fan and we have to, what I call FIO, figure it out. You find new qualities within yourself, new possibilities, like the people in the book. They found new ways of being them, and in fact, better ways of being them. That's the evolution part, not just the surviving. Like Ross didn't just survive what he described. He learned to thrive in it, and because of it, built things he might not have otherwise built. I'm not saying go back and go lie on the, on the floor over the garage, but it wasn't all bad.
So is it a good time to transition to the 10 transition takeaways and provide some of our listeners with some actionable advice?
Actionable advice. What a great idea. Why don't you start, Ross?
I'll go with the one that I think hits home the most with me, and that is it's never just about you. And when I go through a major change, I may internalize a lot of what's going on, and I'm instinctively going to see it through my eyes and how it impacts my life. So any major change, I'm going to look at it and say, wow, what does this mean to me? Everybody does that. However, there's people around me, and change, especially dramatic or traumatic change, is going to have a ripple effect. So that means that if I go through a massive change, so does my wife. So do my kids. So do the people that I work with. The closer you are to me, the more impact it's going to have on you. And just recognizing that no matter what's going on, if my world is disrupted and I have uncertainty, so do the people closest to me. And it just transfers to them. And trying to be aware of that, it may not be instinctive, but once you sit down and go through it, you're going to be much better positioned to not just process what you're feeling and thinking, but also the people around you.
And here's a practical application of that. When you've been aware of what it's like when you go through these events in your life, and like Russ was just saying, it can't necessarily track everything that happened. You don't remember yesterday and that sort of thing. That has an implication on people you love and you work with or you communicate with. So when you know that you're entering this kind of experience, it's a great idea to say to the people around you, by the way, I'm going to need you to watch my back a little bit. Chances are I'm going to be forgetting. Chances are I might do a little breakdown here and there. Chances are I'm going to need to just go for a walk sometimes. So you let people around you know that something's happening, and they don't have to create their own story. They know that you are doing your best to adjust. And I learned that very clearly from one of our advisors from the Midwest who lost his wife, two small kids. He went through a really tough time, and he doesn't hold back telling about how he says how terribly he handled his own transition. And we met, and he now has a transition planning practice. But when his dog died 8 years after his wife, he had feelings that he recognized. And he said to everyone around him, heads up. I don't know how long or what, but this feels like then. So I'm going to need you to kind of watch my back. That's a practical application of what Ross is talking about.
Yeah, that's really great advice. One of the takeaways that caught my attention was this notion of guarding against complacency. And I think that so many of us live today as if it will be the same as yesterday and that tomorrow will be the same as today. Thoughts to that?
Yeah, I can mention what I had learned in a recent CE program about the end of history illusion. I thought it was fascinating. And that is somehow my brain thinks that the way it is right now is who I'm going to be. So even though I've changed and grown and matured, hopefully a lot, over 10, 20, 30 years, somehow I think the person I am today is the person I'm going to be 10 or 20 years from now. But I'm not. I'm going to change. I'm going to evolve. I'm going to think differently. I'm going to feel differently. And I often joke that I'm not qualified to talk for future Ross, meaning you can ask me what I want to do 10 years from now. I may give you an answer, but I've learned enough to understand that I don't really understand what future Ross is going to think, feel, and want, because life's always changing and so am I.
Mm.
And that complacency can, again, radiate out. I think it is natural in our society to want status quo. We want things to stay the same. We're comfortable. Maybe we think about a vacation or buying a house or something, but we prefer the way it is. And I can't speak for other cultures, even though we train in 5 continents. There's shifts there, but this Western idea of loving complacency or loving, we wouldn't say complacency, we would say status quo. that's it, it's a norm, and that's what can get disrupted when life is shifting and people want to go back to that. So they just want things the way they used to be. I remember a lottery winner, wonderful guy, retired fireman, and his wife was a school teacher, and they won $80 million, and that was huge. And there was lots of fun stories around it. So this is just everyday folks, and we work through a lot of the feelings and the whens and the hows and the who's involved in all this. And every once in a while, he would say, "I just want to cut my own lawn again."
Mm.
And because he was outed in the press of, that, so people would come by. He wanted to stay in the house they had been in, but he couldn't. His life had shifted. And his wife was very comfortable with all the bigness, and he wanted to go back. So he was looking for that kind of plateau where he didn't have to think about all these bigger issues and gifting kind of issues. And that's not exactly complacency. That's sort of like trying to find your home space again.
Yeah.
But to make believe that home space is there when it's not there can kind of be dangerous.
Yeah. Another point that you make mention of, and I think it relates to the financial advisors who are involved in the goals-based planning approach, is the most important questions about the future often can't be answered. You mentioned this a second ago, Ross, but I think it bears repeating that as financial advisors, we spend a lot of time talking to people about goals, but the transition takeaway here is that the future can't be answered. How do you square that?
This is a tough one. And I don't know how I would have addressed this 20 years ago if I would have still gone through everything I went through, meaning I now know that I don't have a clue what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm comfortable with that. I don't know what the future holds. It's uncertain. Anytime you do a financial plan, you start putting assumptions in. As soon as you put the first assumption in there, that's it. We're now having an amount of guessing in there. People hate uncertainty. We're humans. We hate it. I hate it. I've hated it more than I hate it now. I think the challenge people have is they're looking for something to say, well, here's the road we're on. Here's what this is going to look like in 20 years. Here's your goal. If we do this, this goal is achievable. They crave that certainty. And as financial planners, we want to give them enough of that to help them take an action, right? To do something, change a behavior. And that may be motivating with goals-based. But I found that most of those goals, they don't play out for the people that are setting them. And it's not that things were worse or better, they're just different. And that's okay. I'm probably a lot more blunt right now, where I just say, I have no clue what the market's going to do. I have no clue what your income's going to be 5 or 10 years from now. I have no clue if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. And everybody nods and says, I know, we never know. Well, then let's embrace that. Let's make decisions today. And when we do the planning process, yes, the goals are important to talk through, but going through the plan, I think it's much more about saying, this is the direction that I'm on right now. It doesn't necessarily tell me the destination. And I have to be comfortable with that I'm making good decisions today. I'm saving, I'm spending intentionally, I'm controlling my risks. Whatever happens 20 years from now will happen, but I have to be much more focused on managing behaviors today than setting a goal and really believing it's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. So if I could sum up, it sounds like what you're saying is you're not invalidating the planning process, but you're sort of giving it a different spin in terms of it being a path of certainty. It's a directional path that is correct today and may need to be adjusted tomorrow.
I often joke that the financial plan is dead, but long live financial planning. Because that is the process where we talk through and it tells us, here is the goal that we have. There are many financial planners out there. They don't even print a financial plan anymore or save it as a deliverable, which was such a big deal. It gets to the point now of let's just make decisions now and move forward and keep making decisions. And it's not saying that the goals are not important to talk about. The process, which Susan can definitely talk to, really helps you get grounded on these are my values. This is what matters to me. And that drives my decisions and my behaviors today. It's an important, but tomorrow is a brand new day, Bob. And when I wake up, my life can change. My family's life can change. My finances can change. And I'm going to have to be ready to adapt.
Yeah. It reminds me of what Michael Kitces said when he was asked about Monte Carlo simulations, which is they're right, but only once, and the moment that you print it out and never again.
I think what Ross is talking about is the next chapter of the profession of financial planning. We just had to come to terms with the way it was done back when I became a CFP, and maybe Russ, I'm from the early 80s when we didn't even quite know what it was, and we developed this sequential plan that required discipline and all of this, and parts of it have not changed and never will change, but the anchoring and the capacity to bob and weave as life happens, and to not react but to respond. Here's an easy takeaway for anyone listening here. Remember what's most important to your life. What is almost sacred? What do you always want to have protected no matter what is going on in your life? So when everything else has changed, remember what you're really committed to. Could be family, it could be your religion, it could be your health, it could be your kids, it could be something that I can't think of right now, but something that is a consistent, that's always been important, probably always will be important, and use that as your anchor and make some decisions around that, always knowing that part is taken into account, that informs everything else.
Yeah. So Susan, I'm not sure if this speaks to, speaking of transitions, the 3 questions to ask yourself about transitions.
Yeah.
That I guess is number 1, right? What do I need to protect? Is that?
Yeah. A financial planner, a certified financial planner, or in our case, a certified financial transitionist, wants to know that, wants to anchor, wants that to inform their planning and their technical advice. That is not an outside sort of discovery question that's nice to ask. That's very much the core.
I'll jump in there. So the protect part is what is it that you have to have? What is your must have? So for example, you may see a situation where someone loses their job, they get downsized, and this is part of the book. And then all of a sudden they realize, I may not be able to replace my income. And instinctively you may think, well, I've got to go find a job. I have to replace my income no matter what, because my future is dependent upon making X amount of dollars. But when you ask, what do you need to protect? You may find out that you're not moving. You don't really need that income. You want to be in your home. Maybe it's where you raised your kids. Maybe it's around other family members. That you may find that where I am is most important. I'll take a pay cut to stay where I'm at. And this is what we walk through with clients, where immediately there's going to be a financial shock if they lost their job or were downsized, and they think, uh-oh, especially if you're 55 or 60 and you're thinking, I'm not going to get rehired. They're trying to get rid of people like me. And you worry about that. Well, maybe you need to replace your income, but if you sit and take time through it, and to think about it, you may think, you know what? I'm more concerned with my family, my quality of life, and the home that I'm in. That's what I need to protect. And if it means I have to, question 2, let go of something, I'll let go of the income that I was making. So question 1, right? What do I need to protect? And question 2 is, what do I need to let go of? And sometimes what I think day 1 is not what I'm going to think a month later.
So when, with respect to what do I need to let go of, I'm reminded of Jim Collins in his famous book, Good to Great, where he talks about what should we be doing and what should we stop doing? And that's a question that very few people ask. So that seems to me like on par with what do I need to let go?
And then there's the third question. The third question is, what new needs to happen? So there are new agreements in life. There's new commitments in life, new decisions. And when you're in transition, you can't see all of this at one time. These are beginning questions. Maybe it's between an advisor and a client they've had for a relationship they've had for 20 years. This is new territory. So again, you establish what is most important. And then sometimes it's obvious what you need to let go of, or maybe, but it gives a structure to the engagement. We're letting go of something, some new things are going to happen. We will figure it out as we move through it.
Talk a little bit about how vital decisions are during the disruption itself.
Yeah,
it's everything.
Yeah, this is the big thing. This is one that I probably think about more than anything else related to transitions. And it's why I study a lot on the decision-making process in the brain. If you look over someone's life, you'll find 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 major life events or transitions. And then if you look at the decisions made, either leading up to, if they actually had anticipation and saw that big event coming, or the decisions they made right after that major change, those were the decisions that moved the needle on their net worth, probably more than anything else. So when we look at these major life changes, you can identify a handful of decisions that really influenced your net worth and your quality of life from that in the future more than anything else out there. But Bob, here's the challenge with that. When we look at those decisions, we can recognize how important they are, how impactful they are to my future. But the strange part is that I'm required to make those decisions when it's hardest to think clearly. When I go through some type of either dramatic or exciting life change or a traumatic life event, it's hard to think clearly. It's hard to see myself in the future. And now in the middle of all this, I have to make some of the most important decisions of my life. It's quite a quandary, but that's why we're so excited to help clients out in these situations, because we know these handful of events and these handful of decisions, these are really the game changers for their future.
And that is why the Sudden Money book was written, the Institute got formed, and that we're still around today, because the stakes are really high when people go through these life events, which frequently overlap, which makes it even more complicated. It is just crazy when you get far enough away from it to say, in our world, you're expected to make life-shaping decisions when you're at the lowest level of your executive functioning. And you are going to live with those decisions, as are everyone else connected to your life. So go ahead, hurry up, make those decisions and get back on board. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why financial transitions planning is different than traditional financial planning or life planning, because it's right there when people are presented with life-shaping decisions. And we don't really even know what those choices are yet. They appear one way, then a little more time appear another way. We want people to step back from everything that is non-essential. The very first thing that I wrote about in Sudden Money was the decision-making process. And I love neurobiology, and we have some wonderful people on our faculty and people like Ross who just can't stop reading about this. We have fascinating conversations about what he read at 3 a.m. with, the brain. But in real life, eyeball to eyeball, we have to keep it as simple as possible. So we created a decision-free zone of what is now, what is essential, what is consequential. If you don't make that decision, chances are well-being or somebody's going to get hurt. So that's usually a few. Then soon, the important things that have more time, like financial planning and investment planning and all that, you take time with that. It's soon, it's not now. And then later are things that people just shouldn't really be thinking about right now. Not enough information, not enough settledness, not enough time goes by. And you just use this as a basic framework, now, soon, and later. And you put your decisions into those categories. And then over time, they move up from later to soon and soon to now. So we had to keep it simple rather than talking about the way the brain processes in the amygdala and the limbic and the prefrontal cortex and how you can snap from one to the other and make mistakes and all that. You know that stuff, but you have to have application that's simple enough that it's repeatable and scalable.
Right. In the book, you talk about the 4-step Transitional process. Is that what you've just described, Susan, or is that something different?
It's a little bit different. It's a model that we created when we first looked at this stuff, Bob, 21 years ago, we were thinking about liquidity events and big changes in money. Turns out transitions don't have to have a change in net worth at all. And in a perfect world, you have some anticipation of an event. That's a preparation stage. You might know that you're going to inherit, retire, or sell your business, whatever. You don't know when or how much, but you see it coming. And a financial transitions can help people prepare for that. And all that does is lower the stress level when the second stage happens, which is ending. That's when an event has happened. There is no going back. The divorce is final. The resignation is in. A death has occurred. And then you have pieces of life that have blown apart that need to come back together. And traditional financial planning focuses on that quite a bit. But during the pieces back together, you have this emotional cognitive shifting going on. So it's a very careful, slower process from our point of view, but it still can be done in maybe a year or two. And then we all do this, we merge into this adaptive stage we call passage. That's when the changes happen, the pieces are kind of back together, but we're still thinking about it. We're still trying to shape this life. And that's the stage, Bob, that takes the longest time. We would guess that out. We've done some surveys, and I wouldn't call that science, but it appears about 5 years for that passage stage to really settle in. And that's where people get impatient and want to make shifts and changes just to stop having the experience of change. So that's a critical time. That's when many people leave their financial planner because they know something's not right, but they don't quite know what it is. So they go look for someone who can listen differently or process with them in a different way. And then eventually the fourth stage is new normal. I got such a kick out of the pandemic when people were talking last year, oh, we're in a new normal. I'm like, not even close, guy, not even close. You're just getting used to what's happening in the ending stage. Because once the pandemic happened, you can't go back and say it didn't happen or I don't want to play. You can, but the rest of the world is playing a different way. So anyway, new normal is when life starts to settle out again. And the heads up there is if you are at that and you can look back and you can see what worked and didn't work, make note of that. A financial transitionist would have that conversation. So next time life shifts, you know the starting places. So 4 stages: anticipation, ending, passage, new normal. It's the model for financial transitions planning that has held up for us for about 19 years.
Yeah, Bob, did you want me to talk about the transitus process? Is that what you're
Yeah,
pulling
if you
out
don't
there?
mind, yes.
So the transitus process is what we use in our practice, and it's an adaptation of the decision-free zone and the prioritization of what do we need to do right now. And your typical financial planner, if you go to their website, you may see a reference to what are your goals? We're going to sit down with you, help you understand. The people that tend to get referred to us, oftentimes their goals have just been shot. They're off the table. And even if they have the same goal, they may not have any idea if it's even possible anymore. So we don't start with what do you want to do 20 years from now? When someone calls in or is referred to us, we do the transitus process. It's 4 steps. And it's just 4 simple questions. The first is what's going on? We want to ask what led them to call us. And the second is, how did you get here? Third, what are you thinking? And fourth, how are you feeling? And I'll unpack those a little bit for an example. So let's say someone calls in and says, well, I'm retiring on Friday. That's what's going on. There's a lot of things that could lead up to retirement on Friday. Hopefully I don't say, well, congratulations, that sounds great. And then I ask the second story or the second question, what led up to this, right? How did you get here? There may be something traumatic that's leading to that retirement. It may not be a celebratory time. So if I want to find out what's going on, I then have to know what's the backstory? How did you get here? That gives me insight into the answers to the next 2 questions, which are, what are you thinking and how are you feeling? Because if I don't know the story, if I don't know what led up to retirement at the end of the week, it's going to be hard for me to understand what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And I'm probably not going to be in a real good position to help you navigate it. So instead of asking about what are your goals 20 years from now we need to know what's going on and then stay present. What are you thinking now? How are you feeling about everything? And then eventually, how do you want to feel? But we really have to figure out what's going on right now. And that's our process.
So folks who know me know that I eat, breathe, sleep, all things retirement. Talk a little bit about how advisors can help clients understand what you describe as the 2 sides of retirement.
There's always going to be two sides of retirement. And I look at two sides of decision-making, two sides of money. There's the financial side and there's the personal side. There was this old belief that I remember hearing years ago that, well, as long as you got enough money to retire, you're going to be okay. You'll figure the rest out. I think I probably believed that 20 years ago, not really understanding how life works. When we look through retirement, yes, we have to understand the finances. We want to get the money right. However, that's just one part of it. We can't diminish the importance of the personal side or the human side. I would argue that the human side is just as important as the financial side. I probably could argue that it's more important than the financial side. And I'm sure Susan would actually argue even better that it's more important. But that's what we need to understand in retirement. It's not just about the money and I'll figure the rest out. We want to be intentional to understand the human side of retirement, what's important there, but also the financial side. And if we approach both of them, the odds of having a fulfilling retirement are much higher.
It is true that the personal side is more important. It actually is true based on science. They're talking now about every decision we make is 70% with the emotional side of our brain or aspect of our brain and 30% with the rational. And if that's true, and it appears to be true, if advisors are really paying attention to their clients, everyone makes financial decisions for non-financial reasons. It just happens. But we, just because it happens doesn't mean we can't make that work for us instead of just trying to avoid it. What we believe is that these two sides are equally important and equally complex, and the personal side is the driver. So what we wanted to create in the way we train certified financial transitioners is to begin with that personal side. They all have excellent training, great skills on the technical side. So when you begin differently, you begin on personal and then you merge into the technical. The questions that Ross just gave us are personal questions. They may have some numbers that come in, but they're really personal questions. And he knows because he's been trained and people in his office have been trained, his team is being trained. He knows that those answers can change. More than one time. So you have to stay present for that personal side. It's not a one and done. A lot of people do a discovery where they ask these, we would call them, in the old days, we called them interior finance questions, because we couldn't just call them personal questions, God forbid, we had to be financial planners. So we called it interior finance. And it's not just on the onboarding or the discovery process. It's paying attention, listening. It's the deep listening. It's the way you ask a question that gives someone permission to tell you what they're really feeling.
So the vast majority of advisors are not yet trained to do that. Right? We've made progress there. Obviously, what you've done has helped a great deal, Susan. The CFP board is now introducing behavioral finance as part of the curriculum. The Investments and Wealth Institute here has many programs around, I'll call it behavioral finance, which maybe gets to the personal elements of things to a degree. How far are we from, what you might describe as the ideal in terms of advisors being able to do this?
There is a lot of progress and it's great. I will applaud all of it. The things that are concerning around this personal side is people have a sense that it takes too much time or it feels squishy. There's no seat of authority to this and all. So what gets introduced is AI. And to put the personal side into algorithms and into technicals or into diagnostics. Psychoanalytical tools, and none of them that I've seen are by themselves bad at all. Some can actually be wonderful and enlightening. The difference, Bob, is we're not really training ourselves to be human to human. We're showing up with all this tool and all this stuff, and if the algorithm says your client is this way and they don't act that way, then the client is wrong and the algorithm is right. It's kind of, there could be a leaning in that way. I think we're at a wonderful position. We're at a tipping point we may even split as a profession, those that are really, really personal and those that like to stay very technical. But the personal ones can't avoid the technical. And the technical need to, I guess they could just say technical. I think what the CFP board is doing is a great start. I think the behavioral finance movement is great. Our particular interest is these life-changing events when the stakes are high and the possibility of recreating, reimagining a wonderful life exists, not just to put everything in place and avoid some risk, but to really expand that. That's an endeavor that I think will outlive me by a long shot, I hope, as a profession, because that's when things really matter with your client. It's when those decisions are made. I love the name of the book. I forget who said that name in front of us, Ross. We were someplace and someone says, "Oh, that sounds like you're shaping change." It was like, yes, that's proactive. And we're not surviving, we're shaping. And that could be the definition of what financial planners are really capable of doing. We're not there yet.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground. For the benefit of our listeners, is there something that you haven't expressed that they absolutely must need to know before they leave this podcast, or anything that you've already expressed that we should reemphasize?
Yeah, I'll throw something in here. I think some financial planners are going to be a little nervous or maybe apprehensive about diving into some of these conversations. And what I would want to stress is, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I don't think I'm one. I don't even play one on TV. So it's not that I'm actually applying a lot of these principles. What the program does that Susan's put together with her team is that it helps me be more diagnostic, where I can recognize the state that someone's in. That's the biggest advantage to me, is understanding where that person's at. Because if I can understand what the person's struggling with in their state of mind, I'm in a better position to help them, but I'm not advising them psychologically. I'm not trying to tell them what they need to be worrying about or how they need to approach all these different things. It's really more diagnostic, understand where they're at, and then really take time to help them prioritize and make the financial decisions. So we don't hold ourselves out that we're any type of therapist or psychological counselor, but we're certainly delving into those areas and we're there to listen. And it may be a little nerve-wracking to some people up front. Some people will love it. I had a subscription to Psychology Today in high school. I was a closet psychology geek. That's okay. I loved it. Still geeking out at 3 a.m, mostly 4 a.m, Susan.
Okay,
I usually sleep at 3, but that's okay. So I get up early, I read, I do my studying. I love that. You don't have to be like that. But doing the training and being in a position to recognize a person's state of mind, what their capacity is at the moment, it's incredibly powerful as a financial planner, but you're not crossing over the line and trying to be a counselor or a psychologist.
Susan, last words?
Last words. I think the CFP board has always wished that they trademarked the term financial planner, because the CFP is more than a financial planner. That is our core belief. Our core belief at the Financial Transitionist Institute is a certified financial planner is more than a financial planner that says they work with clients in transition. I think the public that we serve deserves skill and tools and ethics and protocol and advanced learning around this experience of the human side of transitions. I know that when people discover a CEFT, when they understand what it says, I just saw an email from someone who was referred to a CEFT, a young widow, and she was writing to a friend and copied the financial planner. And she said, look and see, he has these CEFT after his names. That means he's trained to do what I'm going through. He's going to help me with all this chaos, because that's what he does. So I think the public deserves it. however you get this training, great. If you come and you're certified with us, hopefully we'll lead the way. But this is the kind of training that I don't think we can avoid any longer in our profession. It is essentially who people expect us to be.
All right, the book is titled Shaping Change, How to Respond When Life Disrupts Your Retirement Plan. The authors are Ross Marino and Susan Bradley. Ross, Susan, want to thank you for joining us here on the Exceptional Advisor podcast.
Pleasure to be with you, as always.
Thanks,
Always.
Bob.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Advisor podcast brought to you by the Investments in Wealth Institute. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe through iTunes, Spotify, or our website at www.investmentsinwealth.org/podcast to get the latest episodes of our Exceptional Advisor podcast series. For additional resources, updates on events, and exclusive membership deals, visit www.investmentsinwealth.org.